Like many gamers, my gaming career started with Super Mario Bros. I was about 6 years old the first time I took control of our beloved industry-wide mascot. I remember looking between the Super Nintendo controller and the screen, hoping that I might see the secret of how I could control my newfound capped friend. The first time I mounted Yoshi, that was it for me. I was sold. A lifetime gamer since then. The SNES was a friend's machine. Some strange things happened between myself and him and we drifted apart. However, it was not long after that I found some new friends that had an original NES. At the time, I had no concept of generational cycles of consoles, but I knew it was made by the same people and had similar mechanics, but was older than the Super Mario world that had me hooked. The next decade I spent most of my time researching and playing everything from Commodore 64 for Shinobi, committing hara-kiri for killing civilians, after 2 hours in the game. There was also Atari for Space Invaders, and the nostalgia I couldn't really ever experience, to games like Mortal Kombat and Desert Strike. There was Batman, and some proto 3D racing stunt games I can't remember the name of. Judge Dredd, RoboCop vs. Terminator, Aliens, so many. I could list game titles I've played and enjoyed for hours and only scratch the surface of the breadth of games I've played in my lifetime. I find myself nostalgic about only a handful of them to this day, though at the top of that list was Destination Earthstar, a humble sprite-based 3D-ish space battle game in which one could land on a planet, turning the game into a side-scrolling combat shooter. It wasn't until Mario 64 that I realized where games were going. While RTS, action-adventure, FPS, and racing games are the pillars of my gaming palette, I've quite literally played most kinds, if not simply most games, at some point. In the past 15 years, things have both slowed down and sped up for me in regards to gaming. I tend to be hooked on a single game for long periods of time while taking small gamecations. My YouTube career started with Just Cause 2, which used software that could record gameplay. The quality of the capture was hit and miss, but it got me into capturing my gameplay and allowing me to see something I had never seen before. The way in which I play is very musical. As time went on, several thousands of waves of zombies, thousands of carjackings, hundreds of tombs, and the odd 24-hour enduro, I began to see a problem. I started to play games like I was watching cable TV. The patterns were starting to show, and the formula in which developers were designing their games had become to flesh themselves out as simply a gimmick to get my money. I had spent the last 20 years of my life trading, renting, and borrowing games. Now being forced to choose between relatively expensive games has sort of caused the magic gaming had for me as a child to be lost. I could see myself floating down a river, with an edge of a rather large waterfall approaching. I needed something different. Fundamentally different, or my gaming career would become stagnant and boring. The last 10 years have been trying for me. I depend on games to be my main form of entertainment in a very short list of alternatives. The release of Sony's PlayStation 4 changed things for better and worse. Microtransactions have become a staple along with free gaming. The day of PS4 release, I played Battlefield for about 8 hours, got on the next day to find a hotfix, had limited the game to basically a Call of Duty-style rat cage. Without vehicles or large maps, I was lost. I had hung up my COD days after logging thousands of hours in zombies and online multiplayer. I realized a wargame without having access to vehicles was kinda silly. So imagine my surprise the day after spending nearly $600 on a cutting-edge machine that I basically was playing a previous generation game all over again. So I hung up my controller for BF as well. I searched PSN Store for a good few hours and found a humble ad for a game called Warframe. It read Ninjas Play Free. The game was basically calling to me. It had a style and a feel I had always wanted, a frantically colorful and beautiful mess. I never looked back. I found out that it was an independent studio with less staff members than most developers, based in the same country that I live in, only a few kilometers from my hometown. I was intrigued. If I ever was going to create my own third-person action shooter, I could not have imagined it more suited to my gameplay style. About 8 months into playing Warframe, almost exclusively, I remember having this thought. What am I training for? I have this huge, expansive palette of games I've played in my lifetime. What is it about Warframe that had me so hooked? I soon realized it was science fiction. I grew up playing sci-fi games, and the few TV shows and movies I watched were of course Star Wars and Star Trek. both of which I consider myself to be an equal fan of. It was then I realized it wasn't simply the art style, the soundscape, or the tech in Warframe that had me hooked. It was all of it being housed in the same place without much of an explanation, bearing in mind that Warframe is still technically in beta development. Digital Extremes could do whatever they wanted. Whatever the fanbase asked for, they would try to implement, and in that regard they succeeded victoriously. However, just like Call of Duty, eventually it got to a point where I started to see the restrictive nature of games these days. So again, about 2 years and a few months into playing Warframe, almost exclusively, I happened upon a person who thought and experienced gaming much like I had. They understood the draw of Warframe, and more importantly, the design. It being a game based on tile set pieces, at some point, Warframe would either stagnate from the restriction of tile set design, or redesign the game from the ground up to include more expansive and open world concepts, or simply make much larger tiles. The person I had been philosophically pondering with mentioned a word I had not heard before. What about procedurally generating the world like Minecraft? With Arkwing's release, it fed the need for more space. That was when I felt it. I missed my space games. At the time I was playing Far Cry 3 in the background, my gamecation of choice, and was really getting into its map maker. The thing is, the more I tried to make believable landscapes, the less realistic my maps seemed. I needed a good reference point in which to build better looking, more realistic settings. So I jumped on my new Sony Xperia Z1 and started looking at nice landscapes. I kept seeing these pictures of this blocky place that appeared to be very pixelated landscapes. Then that name again, Minecraft. Steve was haunting me. Or perhaps it may have been Herobrine. Either way, Minecraft just started popping up on my radar, until one day I put my foot down to figure out exactly what Minecraft was. And like the Matrix, I began down a very deep rabbit hole, and I was digging straight down. I had thought Minecraft was a game I had missed and was decades old. In fact, it came out very close to the time I started playing Warframe, at least the mobile version. So I went onto Sony Play Store and downloaded the full version, so I could make more believable landscapes in Far Cry 3. Big mistake. Minecraft was that thing I had always been looking for and found myself spending 3 to 10 times more time playing than I realized. I hadn't had that feeling in years. The feeling of losing more time than perceived is kind of a unique thing. The next year was spent bouncing between Minecraft, Warframe, and a few others. Then it happened. I was watching the Spike Videogame Awards of 2013. I saw something that made me forget about everything. But it also brought up memories of the days of old, the real games that defined myself as a gamer I am today. No Man's Sky was it. That was when I first knew it was real. It brought the first moments of Destination Earthstar, Mario 64, and GoldenEye together. Don't get me wrong, I thought in the first moments, it's a video, don't get excited. The inside gamer voice that saved you thousands of dollars. The very next day I began to discover the truth. We're all figments of Sean Murray's imagination. Just kidding. Not really. Well, sort of. I don't know the math. I'm not the smartest person out there, but my basis of logic, reason, rationale, and critical thinking, deduction, and 20 years of absorbing internet metadata with cross-referencing, opinions, and assumed knowledge, I know a few things. I'm relatively knowledgeable in several fields of science. Was never very good at easy math, but the complicated math I seem to be alright with. Though where I excel is spatial recognition, philosophy, quantum mechanics, string theory, and other theories of how, what, where, and why we are here. After searching the internet on a regular basis for something to give me some insight into this mysterious game, I finally found an interview in which the word voxels were used. It was that moment I knew how they did it, almost perfectly. They are brilliant. Didn't really need any more information from that point on. Most of the interviews since have reaffirmed my understanding of how I knew it was real, and what that meant to the gaming community and culture as a whole. Then there was the tech interview. The waveforms, voxels, MIPS, assets, it all made sense. I was destined to play Minecraft in space. And with that, so much more. Everything up to and following the announcement has basically been training. No Man's Sky will be the most colorful and dull, the most fantastic and boring, the most convoluted and straightforward, the most vastly populated and the most overwhelmingly lonely, the most dangerous and the most comforting, the most highly detailed and the least descriptive. It will be like nothing you've ever played before. Unlike every game you ever played, it will make you forget reality and force you to remember reality. No Man's Sky is something different, and quite possibly the most important video game ever made.